I've had the privilege to work with leaders all over the nations, emerging leaders and established leaders, and I've written more than 10 books that are adult-oriented. But some of our primary focus and our mission is to reach kids, youth, and their families. And we watched in Ethiopia. It was one of the greatest privileges and audiences we ever got to work with, were some of those who the world might call unlikely. It was street kids who seemingly were young, and many hadn't even gone to school and didn't have much to give. Were literally growing up in the streets, and yet we watched these kids become leaders in their culture. We watched them build a family on the streets. We watched a movement of multiplication begin, and it all started with empowering each of them to be who God created them to be, by speaking into their identity, by giving them hope, by giving them vision for their lives, and strengthening the purpose that was already inside them. And so that is a big reason we do what we do with LeTourneau Created. It is a big part of our mission of why we write the kids' books, especially, or aiming for animation and those type of projects, because we believe in kids. Not just to take care of them, not just that there's a next generation, but they have so much to offer right now if we'll believe in them. One of my favorite illustrations that brings that to life is from the movie Finding Neverland. The movie is about James Barrie, who is the author of Peter Pan. He had been written many box office bestsellers, right? He was a very accomplished playwright, but all of a sudden had slowed down, and he'd had a few duds in a row, as the movie portrays it. And he didn't know what to do. He was just at a loss. He'd been, all these years, he'd been writing for the adults. He'd been writing for high society London. And he got to a point where the owner, the proprietor of the theater, is going, "What do you have for me, James? You've got to have something new. You've got to have something to sell out these theaters and put people in these seats." So James kind of went back to the drawing board. He ended up hanging out with a widow and her children. And it brought life to him again. He started dreaming again. He started believing in a new way and seeing in a new way. And before you know it, they became the inspiration for his imagination, as he started to see the pirates and the fairies and the Indians and the fairy dust, and the story of Peter Pan started to unfold before his eyes. And so he begins to write the story. Eventually, he goes back to that proprietor of the theater, and James Barrie says, "This is what I have for you. This is the new hit," and starts to describe Peter Pan for the very first time. And the proprietor listens, and by the end is going, "James, what self-respecting doctor or lawyer or businessman from high society London is going to want to watch a movie about pirates and fairies and Indians and pixie dust and all of these things?" And James thought for a minute, and he said, "You know what? You're right. So this is what I want you to do." He said, "Do this for me. On opening night, I want you to save 25 seats scattered throughout the auditorium." And the proprietor, again, back to the tangible questions. "Who are in these seats, James? Are they paid for? Why?" And James said, "Don't worry about it. Just for opening night, save me 25 seats scattered." So they go through all the preparations to get the play ready. Opening night is finally here. They're waiting for curtain call for the first time of Peter Pan. And those 25 seats are still sitting empty. They're getting nervous. Where are they at? Are people going to understand this? All of those questions are still there. And then right before curtain call, 25 orphans show up, orphan children show up at the doors. And they funnel in, each to their scattered seat across the auditorium, mixed with all the people in their gowns and tuxedos who are there for opening night. Peter Pan starts for the first time, and just as they predicted, the adults couldn't get it. They were too far away from that childlike belief, too far away from being able to go from seeing as believing to believing as seeing. And so the play starts, and they're just sitting there, and it's in just dead silence. It's going nowhere. It's their worst fears, right? And then all of a sudden, though, but the kids, they're not too far from that place. They get it. And they start to smile. They start to giggle. They start to laugh. And before you know it, the adults are looking at them like, what are you doing? But the more that the kids engaged, the more they got it, it spilled over, and it was almost a reverse multiplication, where normally we expect all influence and multiplication to be from a top-down pyramid, right, in all our societal structures. But this was a reverse one. It was from the grassroots. It was from the children to the adults. And it spilled over, and before you know it, the adults are emptying out all their pomp and circumstance, and they're getting back to the child's level, the child inside of them who's just been hidden up and buried all this time. And suddenly now, what they couldn't engage with at the beginning of the play, now they're laughing, they're engaged, and the entire audience, because of what started with the kids, are all enthralled with this brand new play, Peter Pan. And by the end, it is just the most greatest standing ovation of the kids and the adults all together. And that is how Peter Pan, what we now know as this world-renowned play and movie and so much more, and all the characters, but that's how it began. It began going straight to the kids because they had belief. There's something that often we adults don't. And so when we will take the time to invest and speak life and hope and identity and purpose into them at a young age, believing they're capable of more than we often do, we'll be surprised with the results. And that is our mission with Laterno Creed. Please like and subscribe for more.